today's program. I am excited to be bringing you Julie Smith, who is a proud Edwardsville native, and as well as someone I've known since grade school. She was a St. Boniface girl, I was a St. Mary's girl, and then we went to high school together. She is an amazing, intelligent, and awesomely positive person who she's just, I love her. She's great. Even though I don't see her too much anymore, but she's awesome. She teaches in the School of Communications at Webster University in St. Louis. She is the author of Master the Media, How Teaching Media Literacy Can Save Our Plugged-In World, as well as an upcoming book on how to increase student engagement in the university classroom. Julie has done media workshops in 30 states and in countries as varied as Argentina and Uzbekistan. Her research focus is ways to determine what information online is actually valid. My opinion, this topic could not be any more timely. I know I find it extremely frustrating to disseminate facts versus fiction, and today Julie is going to steer us in the right direction. So may I introduce to you Julie Smith.
Hi, everybody. I'm going to show, and I realize you all are muted, and I just wanted you to say hi back. Never mind. You can all wave. And thank you very much for that intro. And no pressure, no pressure. I'm going to try to go through this quickly and make it worth your time, because I know that we've all been spending a lot of time in front of screens, and sometimes the less, the better. So I have been teaching at Webster since 1990, or actually I've been teaching media literacy since 1997. I've been at Webster since 2001. I also spent some wonderful years at SIU in graduate school and teaching there as well, and an Edwardsville High School class of '86, right, Ann? Woo. So my field is media literacy, and what that means is that I attempt to help people understand the media that we consume every day. And it's not, you know, I don't say that the media are bad necessarily. They're not. They're just a huge part of our lives that no one really talks about. So the average now is that Americans spend between 11 and 11 and a half hours a day with electronic mass media. So I feel like in the schools and in our kitchen tables and in our carpools, we should be talking about the media much more than we do. But one of the biggest issues that I have when I teach my classes or do my workshops is that most people say that the media don't affect them. There's this interesting phenomenon where they did a survey once a couple years ago where they asked Americans, do the media influence society? And 80% said yes. Then they changed the wording of the question and said, do the media affect you personally? And only 12% said yes. So one of the biggest hurdles really is to recognize, help people recognize the role that the media play in their lives and the role that the media play in our perception of the world and others and ourselves. So here's how I try to explain what I do. So here's a caveman, right? And he's telling his tribe or his clan what it's like to hunt, how to survive. Here's someone doing something similarly, maybe a couple of hundred years ago, teaching the kids what's important, what's valuable, what's good, what's bad, telling stories about their culture. And so what I want to ask now is, who tells our stories now? Who teaches us about our history and our culture now? They do, and they do, they do, and they do. The difference is now is that these media organizations are not in public service. They do not exist to educate, entertain, or inform us, even though in many cases those things do happen. But their sole purpose is to make money for their stockholders. And once we understand the relationship or the role that we play in the economic structure of it all, some of it, I think, starts to make more sense. So my mantra is that we can't outrun the media. We can't outlaw the media, but we can outsmart it. And how do we do that? Well, I like to train people to constantly ask questions about the messages that they're consuming. So you want to ask constantly, who's the sender of the message? What's their motive or intent? What tips or tricks do they use in creating the message to get my attention? What information is left out? Who profits from this message? How could someone else interpret this message differently than me? And the big question now, like Anne mentioned, is how do I know what is real and what is not? But misinformation has been around forever. If you remember the bat boy that was found in the cave here, Elvis was in St. Louis. Jennifer Aniston has said that if she actually counted all the times that she's been claimed to be pregnant, she'd have something like 21 kids by now. All you do is you take an old photo and you slap a sensational headline on it, and people are going to believe it. And I love this quote from Abraham Lincoln: everything you see on the internet is 100% true. So it's harder than ever now to determine what's real and what's not, because we're consuming so much of it. And one of the reasons that it's so hard now is that we can create information that looks legitimate. So you and I can create something on our phones or on our computers that look just as legitimate as something from CNN or the New York Times. This is all happening while trust in the traditional news is at an all-time low. Now, I have college freshmen typically. They have never consumed news from what we would consider mainstream media. They don't. It just doesn't even get on their radar. So when we say traditional news or legacy news, many people under 30 do not consume information from those sources. And then those of us that are over 30, we are trusting the traditional news less and less. And this is all happening while we live in social media echo chambers. So online, we tend to congregate with people who think, feel, believe, and vote the way that we do. And so research tells us that if we see a message that makes the politician we love look great and their opponent look bad, we're less likely to check it for authenticity because we like it. It affirms what we already feel. So all of this is happening while there's a vacuum almost about information about the coronavirus, for example. So here's some charts about how we've lost trust in television news and newspapers over the last few years. But this is really interesting. This poll showed that people don't trust the media, but they do trust their source. So that means essentially that my very liberal sister-in-law doesn't trust the media, but she trusts MSNBC. And my very conservative sister-in-law doesn't trust the media, but she trusts Fox News. And so we're siloing ourselves into media consumers in different categories, and that keeps us from being really, truly informed. But at the same time, these traditional sources are making lots of mistakes. This is one of my favorite examples. It's not China, it's not Hong Kong, it's South America. And I love this one too. We have to remember that these organizations are run by human beings, and they are in a constant source of trying to feed this 24-hour news machine. And so it's more important to be first than be right. So many mistakes are made. And one of the things that I really struggle with is people who view any news source as gospel. You know, we have to remember that there's so many variables with how news is produced and consumed. So this chart was pretty interesting. I had a bunch of people send me this chart after the election. And you know what, Anne and Usanda, I'll send these charts out, or I'll send these slides out in case you want to share them with anybody. Loads of people sent me this chart and said, Julie, you need to print this up and give this to your students. And I thought, okay, first of all, my students don't consume news from any of these sources, but also they're not going to pay attention. Really, what I thought was a more interesting exercise was to give them a blank chart and have the students study a particular news source and then decide where it goes in the chart based on whether it skews left or skews right. And this brings up something else too. Here's another chart. I really like this one because it talks about it differentiates between their news and opinion. So for example, we subscribe to the Wall Street Journal. Their news I would consider to be completely right down the middle, but their opinion page, of course, leans conservatively. Just like the Atlantic leans to the left, CNN news leans to the left, CNN opinion leads even farther left. So I like this chart only because it differentiates between the opinion page and the actual news, because in many cases, they can be different. You can have very credible central news, but have the opinion be either on the left or the right. And here's the thing too. A lot of times in workshops, people will say to me, well, I don't like the news because it's biased. And my response is always, and this is probably kind of curt, why do we expect bias, or why do we expect objective news? Where are we entitled to objective news? News is a business. And if objective news made money, we would have it. But it doesn't, because we like to be confirmed with how we already feel. Yeah. So now this is all going on while here comes the coronavirus in March. So we've set the table perfectly, right, for there to be an unbelievable amount of misinformation about the virus. In fact,
Media.
the first week of March, this was a great headline, a fake news nightmarescape, which is true. He says the first true epidemic of polarized, plugged-in era comes with all the attendant conspiracy theories, and it's spreading on social media as fast as the virus itself. And that's completely true. Because there wasn't a whole lot of information about the virus, how you could catch it, how it was cured, and what the symptoms were, there was all of this space for extra people to insert information and people would believe it. Now, this poll I thought was pretty interesting. It says, majority of those who get most news from social media say they've seen at least some misinformation about the coronavirus. I would say that 100% of the people who get their news from social media have seen misinformation. They just might not realize it. Now, this is interesting. These were, you can go to Google and go to Google Trends and enter in any topic, and it will show you how often people are searching for that topic. This is the Google Trends for the corona beer virus. People actually thought at one point that it was related to Corona beer, and there were even memes about it, which I thought were hilarious. So here we have this perfect storm, right? Perfect storm of misinformation about the virus. And there's even a new word to describe it now. It's called the infodemic, that we're being inundated with information, and it's impossible to tell what's real and what's not. Because, you know, on the internet, you can find research that says today is actually Friday, right? Even though it's Thursday. So there's an interesting group called First Draft News, and they came out with different types of misinformation. So misinformation is when people unintentionally make mistakes. Disinformation is when the mistakes are intentional. And malinformation is when disinformation is shared with malicious intent. Okay, so there's different types. And I know that we have all experienced friends on social media platforms who have shared things that are inaccurate without realizing that they're doing it. And that's just plain old misinformation, just mistakes. There's a lot of disinformation about the cause of the virus. People, you know, there's some conspiracies that say that Bill Gates was involved, or that there were all these videos about the virus before it was even known. There's also misinformation about how the virus is spreading. And this continues, like these are examples from March, but this continues even now with the debate about whether or not the virus can stay on a surface and what cleaners you should use to try to clean a surface. But here's something that I think we find a lot, especially on Facebook. You will have some source say that my friend works for the CDC or my friend works for the government and you need to share this information. There's no proof that any of this is true. Usually they have little nuggets of information. Like this, for example. This was a video that someone shared with me on Facebook asking if it was true. Can bananas prevent COVID-19 infection? Well, it was packaged like a perfect news program, right? All they did was have this lady talking about how bananas can prevent COVID-19, and then they included a bunch of B-roll or background video of bananas. And it was done as a joke, but it went viral on Facebook in Australia. So all you have to do, it's so easy to create something. So there's also confusion about the government and official responses. Now, I actually received this from someone who is the daughter of 2 professors. And I want you to look at this and notice there's just enough nuggets in here to make it believable. The president will evoke what is called the Stafford Act. Okay, I don't know what that is, but it sounds official, right? Mandatory quarantine for the nation. Stock up. There's this sense of urgency, right? Please forward to your network. Now, typical official communication will never say, please share, please forward, or make this go viral. So that's usually another clue. But I want to show you how easy it is. Now we're going to go to the internet now. And I'm going to show you how easy it is to create something. I'm at a site called ifaketextmessage.com. So let's say that I want to fake a message from Madison County. And the message is, rumors are there will be riots on Main Street in Edwardsville tonight. Be advised. Okay, now, see how easy that was? So I'm going to go here. I'm going to take a click of this. Oops. And now I'm just going to go to Twitter. Now, if I put this on Facebook, do you think there would be people that would believe it? It looks like it's a text from Madison County, right? People would believe this and share it without ever checking to see if it's legitimate. And that took me, what, 10 seconds? That's how easy it is to create these types of fakes. And it's a little scary, isn't it? I used to have my students actually create fakes as a part of class, just so they could get the idea of how easy it was. And one of the students actually said that they didn't want to do it anymore because it made them feel powerful, which I thought was a pretty interesting response. Okay, so let's go back to this. There's really good ways to share information and really bad ways. This is an example from Lyda Cruson, the mayor of the city of St. Louis. This is a bad way to share information because most people consume information visually. We can consume images 40,000 times faster than we can consume words. This has way too many words on it. And I know that it's a press release and that this is what they do, but this is not effective because really what they need to do is just do bullets, right? And this was actually from the New York subway. This was genius because they used Twitter and look, they used bold print. We will operate regular subway service. It's very plain and cut out. Government agencies don't really know how to communicate very well, sadly. So here's a fun conspiracy that came up. Someone claimed that 5G antennas were related to the coronavirus and that the government was placing secret 5G antennas around the country. And they used this picture. I saw this on Twitter. And this is a pretty interesting picture, right? Because I didn't know that chimneys could be 5G or phone antennas. So I did a Google reverse image search, which I'm going to show you how to do. And it turns out that this particular photo is from 2013. So what they did was just find an old photo and then repurpose it into something else. And I'm going to show you how easy it is to do that. So I'm going to get online here and I'm going to go to, let's go to Google. I'm going to say riot. I'm going to look for a picture of a riot. All right, so let's say this picture, okay? Now I'm going to copy it. Now I'm going to go back to Twitter. I'm going to use all caps because people pay attention to that. And I'm going to put St. Louis. I'm going to put BLM. Okay, I'm going to put all these hashtags so that people who are following these hashtags will see this. That's how easy it is to create something and just watch it go. And if people are following these hashtags, like for example, I want to make sure I get out of Twitter before I accidentally send this. So for example, if you notice all the hashtags here, that means that people, they're looking for people who agree with them who are searching for these. And all I did was do some research about different ways that cell phone towers are disguised. They do them in palm trees, they do them in pine trees, they do them in cacti, they do them in flagpoles, they even do them in churches. And yes, they have been in fake chimneys for 10 years. So the photo is a legitimate photo, but it's just been repackaged and reframed. And it's very, very easy to do that. So you have to make sure that you always question, is this photo really current? This is another thing that went viral towards the end of the beginning of the pandemic. Remember, we were hearing all these stories about how hospitals were war zones and that there were so many refrigerated trucks parked outside. Well, there was a group that was determined to claim that that was all a lie from the MSM, stands for mainstream media. What they did was a hashtag called Film Your Hospital. So they would go to hospitals and film the empty parking lots and then claim that everything we were being told about the hospitals and the virus was a lie. Okay. What they didn't realize, and they're all on YouTube, and they're pretty interesting and easy to debunk, which I did several times because that's my weird hobby. What they didn't acknowledge is that during all of this, nobody was allowed in the hospitals. There were no elective procedures, no visitors were allowed, so of course the parking lots are empty, right? And one of the videos that I debunked was from this tiny town in Florida. None of the videos that claimed to be empty were ever filmed around New York City. And so I think it depended on what part of the country you were in as well. But remember, if I believe that the mainstream media is terrible and that the government is lying to me, I'm going to believe this and I'm probably going to send it out. So we have to remember how our brains work and how we are so attracted to images more than words. This is a meme that I saw, and it was shared by someone who is anti-vaccine. This is a really, really effective way to communicate because it gets the message across quickly and it's visual, right? This is the 53-page guide from the Australian government about vaccines. Which one are people going to pay more attention to? And this is, if any of you are in government or government communication, you have to start moving your communication away from words and into images because we live in a visual society now, not so much a literate society. And more people are going to remember this meme about vaccines than are ever going to read that 53-page document. So this leads to something called the overkill backfire effect. And what it means is that the easier the information is to process, the more likely we are to buy it. We're going to buy into information if we can process it easily. If we have to read a 53-page document, But if you can show me a meme, even though I know in my head it's inaccurate, I'm more likely to believe it. And I fall for this myself. So I have to own up to my own biases here. So Peter Quinones tweeted this out, and it was from a TV station saying that state emergency order calls for fines up to $1,000 for ignoring social distancing. And what do you notice about the picture? There's 11 people standing really close to each other in the picture. And so I tweeted this out and said, the irony, because, you know, I'm kind of a libertarian and I tend to think that maybe the government is a little misleading sometimes. And I thought, this is great. This is such a great example of what I already thought in my head, right? Well, it turns out this went viral. Loads of people started tweeting this, but what it was, and no one bothered to know, was that this was actually a screenshot from a video of a bill that she signed into law in January. And the TV station acknowledged that and said, we were using stock footage of the governor, and people thought that it was actually the bill signing from when they set up the fine for social distancing. And I fell for it because of my own biases. And this is called the worldview backfire effect, that we process information in biased ways. And when we are confronted with something that disagrees with what we already feel, we tend to double down. It's kind of like, I explain it to my kids that there's a shield, like in Star Wars, that we have shields up, and it's very difficult for information to get through those shields many times. So the biggest problem really is that it's just too easy to create and spread misinformation. So I'm going to show you one of my favorite examples. We're going back to the internet, so bear with me. So there's a website here called breakyourownnews.com. Okay, so I'm going to go back to this, let's see. How about this one? Okay, so now I'm going to save this on my laptop. I'm going to call it Riot Pick. Okay. So now I'm going to go to break my own news. This is how easy it is. My headline. And I'm going to go to my files. Oops. There's my Riot Pick. I'm going to upload it. Now, all I have to do is just take a little snip of this. And I can put it on Facebook and watch it go. And again, that took me, what, about 10 seconds? Okay. It's so easy. And I think that some people do this for sport. The research says that some people do it for sport. Some people do it to fool the other side. And other people create this online misinformation just to stir up problems. And this is one that went viral over on my side of the river without any sort of credibility at all. But look, it's the police friend. South County Mall is going to have riots tonight, which is like there would be 4 people at South County Mall. South County Mall is a total ghost town. But so much of this happened, especially during the pandemic, or the beginning of the pandemic. So here's one, reports of a tiger on the loose near the Oakland Zoo. Tigers are all accounted for at the Oakland Zoo. They just checked and confirmed. Okay. And then someone tweeted this, which I love. That's exactly what a tiger would say. Please confirm you are not a tiger. And I love that sense of humor because whoever this Twitter account knows to always ask for confirmation. Please confirm you are not a tiger. This went viral saying that there's a hippo walking the streets of Chicago right now. And this is when there were so many photos being circulated of the streets in our major cities being completely empty. Well, actually, if you do a Google reverse image search of this photo, you see that it's actually from a hippo in Spain that escaped from the circus. Okay, so what do we do? And this is huge, especially because we're approaching an election year. The quality of our information directly shapes the quality of our decisions. And people will say, Julie, where should I get my news? And I say, it doesn't matter where you get your news, as long as you understand where your news is coming from. As long as you understand that the news is a business and they will tell you whatever you want to hear to keep you from changing the channel or clicking to another site. And so that's kind of the first thing to recognize, is that the role we play in the economic structure of it all. Stop and think, check your source, but I use these tools. The very first thing I do is check my feelings. If I'm consuming a message that makes me really angry, really sad, really happy, really confused, that's my first clue that I should probably check it for authenticity. One of the things we encourage is called lateral reading. So for example, this was during 2016, and this is genius. It says, did you know Pennsylvania now has online voting? It's critical we get out the vote this year to defeat Donald Trump. To vote online, simply post Hillary with the hashtag presidential election on Twitter. Okay, anybody would know that voting on Twitter does not work, right? But clearly there are people who fell for this. It looks legitimate and it's so well done. It's genius. It's genius. And Trump won Pennsylvania, but it would have taken 30 seconds to get online and find out if Pennsylvania really did have online voting, right? So what you want to do is check other sources. If one meme says that online voting exists, that's not enough. Just like this, if somebody gets on Facebook and posts that Queen Elizabeth tested positive for corona, and that person on Facebook is the only one talking about it, that's a red flag. You want to do lateral reading and check other sources to see if they are saying something similar. We also need to recognize standard journalism practices. Now this is from TikTok. Oh, we could go on and on about TikTok, but this is a woman who lives on the Hill, claiming that the city was replacing regular streetlights with streetlights that would spy on us. Well, you know, you don't need a journalism degree to be on TikTok, but you typically do in order to write for the Post-Dispatch. And so here's an article explaining that the streetlights in St. Louis are going to get smarter because they can change the color of the lights based on whatever sports team is playing that night. Okay, so lateral reading would have shown this person that they really weren't to spy on us. So here are some practical tools that I use. And the good news is that I have a list of these that I've sent to Masanda, and he's going to share those out with all of you. So you will have links to all of these tools that I'm about to show you. The most important is Google reverse image search. What that does is tell you every other website that is currently using the image that you're looking at. That's how I can figure out if the antenna chimney is actually from 2013, okay? It's so easy to take old photos and reframe them or repackage them. So once you learn how to use Google reverse image search, it is so easy to debunk things online. Also, if any of you are on Twitter, you've probably been confronted with a follower or a comment from someone who's not real. It's probably a bot. There's a site called Botometer where you enter in the user screen name and it will tell you whether or not that account is a bot. And I'm happy to report that I am only 0.2 out of 5 bot, according to Botometer. Snopes, of course, is the granddaddy of them all. It gets 300,000 hits a day. People claim that Snopes leans left. I think that it does, but I also think that most media do. So if you check something on Snopes and you're not quite sure about it, there are other sites that you can check, like Emergent. Emergent is very similar to Snopes, but it's faster. So if something goes viral this morning, Emergent will have it on its website this afternoon. TrendsMap is a site that will show you what hashtags are trending in any area of the globe. So this is from an hour ago in North America, and then I zoomed into St. Louis. And if you see that this morning in St. Louis, they announced the soccer team name and colors. So that's why MLS for the Lou is trending in St. Louis. Now, TrendsMap won't necessarily tell you if something is fake, but if you see that there's, you know, race riots happening in Wichita and you get on TrendsMap and nobody in the Wichita area is tweeting about it, then you know that it's probably not really happening. Whois is a website that will tell you who owns the domain of the website you're getting information from. And I have my students use this because they usually discover something pretty interesting. They will discover that there's an extreme right-wing website and an extreme left-wing website owned by the same company, which demonstrates to them that really all of this information sharing is nothing but a business. Hoax Slayer is a lot like Snopes and Emergent, but they separate their categories into email hoaxes, memes, online misinformation, like they have it categorized so it's easier to search for. If you see something on YouTube that seems a little fishy, you can upload the clip to the YouTube data viewer and it'll tell you exactly when and where the clip was uploaded. Because it's also very easy to take an old YouTube clip and repackage it or repurpose it for something current. You can also enter a YouTube clip into this website called Watch Frame by Frame, and it will tell you if the clip has been doctored or not. PageRank Checker will tell you where the website actually fits in Google searches. So if you come across something on a website that doesn't have a very high rank, that means that it's probably a very new website and that it hasn't been linked by others. So it's a little fishy. So the higher that a website fits on the PageRank Checker, the more credible it is, typically. So First Draft News has fantastic resources for students, news consumers, and journalists of verifying online information, and so does a group called the News Literacy Project. In fact, they have, during the pandemic, they have made all of their services completely free for not just teachers, but for the general public as well. They also have a really neat app that's a fake news game where you can say whether or not you think what they're posting is legitimate or not. So really what I would encourage you to do is activate that internal BS detector. We all have it, it just needs to be activated. And remember, the most important thing is if you have a really strong emotional reaction to something, that's probably the first clue that you should check it for authenticity. So at this website, it's a bit.ly fake tools. is a Google Doc that has a link, hot link to every one of the sites that I just mentioned. And like I said, this is what I shared with Musanda. And then my website is heyjuliesmith.com, and I have lots of information on there as well. So now I'm going to stop sharing and see questions. Yeah, Tracy, I agree. They have too much time on their hands. And I always wonder too, I'm like, do these people not have jobs? Like, what do they do all day? Because a lot of these fakes would take a lot of time to create. I mean, the ones that I did were just super quick. I know it is sad that people waste their time, but you know, I think in some cases, like that meme about online voting in Pennsylvania, I think that had legitimate effect, you know? So now should we open, what do we do, Ann? Do we open for questions now? Have I freaked you all out? Did I give you information that you didn't know yet?
You know, I don't know. It makes me feel really stupid that I'm
Why?
just being played, you know, because it's just, I wouldn't even know where to start to even try to do any of this. Now you gave us tools and now we can try it. No, but it's just, yeah, I feel like, gosh, I'm just being played by the media left and right.
And that's okay. We all are. I mean, even though those of us that do this for a living, we still get played, and I still get emotionally manipulated by the media constantly. Like it's the nature of the beast. And when you're spending 11 hours a day with something, of course, it's going to have an impact on us, right? Matt wants to know top news agencies that you consider gold star reliable. My typical, like the advice that I was giving people at the beginning of the pandemic was get your information from sites that do not sell advertising. I have a feeling that and I don't necessarily mean NPR. Like for the pandemic, I was pushing everyone to the Johns Hopkins website because they don't sell ads. Typically, if there are advertisements involved, they're going to sensationalize whatever they're telling to keep us watching and keep us from clicking. I actually, when I want to see what's happening in the world, I have a list on Twitter of news sources, and it includes the Washington Post, Fox, MSNBC. I read the National Review. I also read the Atlantic, the Associated Press, Reuters, United Press International. And once, if breaking news is happening, for example, and I follow all of those people's coverage, I feel like I get a wider impression of what's happening rather than just getting it from MSNBC. So I don't think that there are news agencies that are gold star reliable, but I think if you consume news from as many sources as possible, you have a better chance of getting the whole reliable picture, if that makes sense. Flip phones. Oh, you're right. So do y'all think that you might try any of these tools I'm sharing out? I hope so.
I think it's going to be interesting to see how much of the conversation on Saturday at our event focuses around some of these sites that we've all checked out between now and then.
Oh, good. Good.
I'm also wondering if I need to sign up for your class.
Oh. Well, I would love it if you did. Actually, all my lectures are on YouTube, so they're all on there. And no cell phones allowed. Yeah, it's a really interesting world where I almost feel like we would be better informed if we had 10 minutes of news a day instead of 24 hours, because it would encourage our news producers to edit themselves into what is really, really important rather than 22 hours of fluff and 2 hours of something. Yeah.
There's probably a lot of agreement with that statement.
Yeah, yeah. That's why it's critical thinking. It's just critical thinking skills. That's what it boils down to.
I would agree. And from having been on a debate team back in high school, and you can find evidence to argue one way on one round and argue the exact opposite the next and make them both convincing.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And the truth is always kind of somewhere in the middle of all that, isn't it? Someone just asked for my YouTube channel, so I'm going to post the link. I have a bunch of class lectures on there, but I also have, one of my weird hobbies is to debunk online misinformation. So I actually walk you through, like I find something that is kind of fishy, and then I walk you through how I debunk it. So there's a playlist on my YouTube channel of debunking videos. So that's like a tutorial almost of how I use the sources that I just shared with you.
Gotcha. One thing I'm curious about, if a news story gets going, it's interesting to me how sometimes if you go to multiple different sites, you hear the exact same verbiage.
Yes, and that's from talking points a lot of times that are shared by operatives in the political parties or public relations firms. And also, really there's a very small number of companies that actually own most of the media, especially the local news. So like Tegna, for example, is a company that owns 50 television stations across the country. So they might be told by their management to cover a certain story, and so that all of those stations are going to sound the same.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Well, Julie, thank you for your time, your presentation. We've been getting a lot of accolades for our recent programs, but I got a feeling we're going to get a deluge on this one. So.
Well, I hope so. I hope that it's been worth your time, and it's been such a treat getting to talk about something I love, because I haven't been in front of my classes since March 15th, and I've been working in my basement like a lot of you all have. And so it's been a real treat to talk about something that I love so much. Well, thank you.
Thank you. And I'm sure Ann will be getting you a plant courtesy of the Tasowski family and home nursery.
All right. All right. And I do have to tell you, every time I come back to Edwardsville, it just fills me with pride. I'm just so very, very proud to be from Edwardsville.
It's a great place full of great people.
Yeah. My blood is still orange, very orange.
Well, thank you. Before we go into the 4-way test, Masanda, I wanted to mention to everybody, we are getting very close to resuming some live meetings back at the church. We're still working on a couple things to tie up the loose ends. We may have a max of between 30 to 35 people, cafeteria style food. So it'd basically be the same food as what we've had in the past, just not in the buffet line. We'd be going past the window and Barb or Diana would be dishing it out for you, just as, giving you whatever you want. So just be a little bit different delivery system. And we'd have to sit social distancing and honor the church's guidelines as well as governmental regulations. And we'll probably set it up somewhere along the lines of sending out an RSVP list. So whoever the first 30 or 35 are that get back to reserve a spot can come live. And then we'll also blend this with a Zoom meeting so that we capture both ends and try not to leave anybody out. So if anybody has any thoughts, questions, concerns about that, please let me or someone on the board know, and look forward to getting back to seeing folks live and in person. And then also taking advantage of programs like this, where this was a lot easier. This program was, I think, easier to be viewed online in a Zoom presentation. So it's going to be pretty neat. Look forward to getting back with everybody and looking forward to Saturday. Masanda, how about if we move into the 4-way test?